Colleagues, thanks, or participants, thanks again for joining the session. Just a reminder of how to access the online application form and some of the documentation that's required to complete your application or to give further guidance. You would do so by accessing the Jobs Fund's website. The Jobs Fund's website is www.jobsfund.org.za. It's been posted in the chat continuously. And once you've landed on the Jobs Fund's website, there is a clickable link that specifically talks about for further information around the National Pathway Management Network Innovation Fund. When you've clicked on that link, you would scroll towards the end of the page where you'll see a little bit of a write-up of the National Pathway Management Network Innovation Fund. But in terms of where to access some of the critical documents, there are links that are available for you to download the term sheet. When you click on it, you would then be able to save it to your laptop or computer or device that you are using. Another critical element is, or document, is the application user guide. This again is a step-by-step instruction on how to complete the application form via the online portal. And I'll be taking you through a little bit of a segment later on this afternoon. Again, also a reminder in terms of frequently asked questions, this is a live document that we're continuously updating to ensure that we give you the best responses, and based on some of the queries that we have received through our help desk as well as our briefing sessions that took place last week. As you can see, already here we've got presentations from our briefing sessions as well as the audio, and we will also be posting this presentation as well as other information constantly on our website. Importantly is that there is an apply here button, and once you click that apply here button, it will take you through to our online portal where you would then be able to access the online application form. So Moketi has asked me to just advise on the initial registration. So once you've landed on the online portal's landing page, you would need to register yourself, which requires you to put in a name and surname, an email address, complete a check digit validation. And once you've completed that process, you would be emailed a set of login details that you would then be able to use to gain access onto the online portal. So once you have actually completed the very first step of registration, you would then see that in the middle of the page, there's a section called New, Create a New Application. And by doing so, you would then be able to actually start your application process. By clicking on the Create New Application button, what you'll see is that there are some pre-registration details that you would complete. What type of institution are you? The title, meaningful title of the project or intervention, as well as the institution or main institution that's applying and where your head office would be based. Once you've completed that pre-registration step, you will receive a reference number, which is similar to the one that I'm highlighting on the screen here. And this reference number is important because if you have any queries around or difficulties around the application form, you are then able to quote that reference number so that we are able to attend to your queries as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The very first thing is that you would, or tab that you would see when you enter into the online application is the eligibility criteria tab. And I'll ask my colleague Sifiso to just speak to this tab.
Sifiso, kindly take us through eligibility at a high level for the benefit of colleagues doing initial registration.
Thank you, Mokiti. There is 11 questions under eligibility criteria. Applicants are requested to fill up all the questions. Is usually there's a yes, no, and then NA. And at the end of the, the questions, so if you just scroll down it to the end of the questions. Yeah. So at the end of the questionnaire, you will actually either get, if you don't qualify, if you're not eligible, you will be closed out of the application. But if you're qualifying, then you'll be allowed to complete the application form. So that's it really. That's those 11 questions have to be filled up, and then if you don't qualify, you will get an email notification saying you don't qualify. But if you do qualify, it will open up for the next section to be completed. So that's it as far as the eligibility criteria is concerned.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophie. And then just lastly, Mo, so I think the other point is that we're talking to the ABC PIMP, and where can we find that or locate that on the online application form? It will be located on the right-hand side of the online application form. It will be the very first link. Again, when you click on it, you would then be asked to open it or save it. You would then save that onto your computer and open it up so that you can actually start utilizing or completing that particular template. Mogeti, I think I've covered that section. Thank you.
Awesome. Colleagues, thank you very much. I trust that this has outlined and assisted colleagues to understand how to register, how to navigate the initial eligibility questions, which will then determine whether you are proceeding with the application. There's also a better overview on how do you access the ABC PIMP. For colleagues that have just come into the chats and into the training, the purpose of this training is to help you understand the different requirements of the application process, and we've broken it down in different parts. Now we're going to get into the section on the activities and outcomes. Then after after break time, we're going to get into the finance section. Later on, we're going to look at the different legal and compliance requirements. For organizations that have the benefit of coming as a team, this will be good as well to help you understand where to focus your energies and your strengths as you are completing the application process. Once again, the presentation will be made available on the website. Lerato continues to post updates where to access the presentation and the recording, and the portal link to the registration side and accessing the ABC PIMP continues to also be posted. Colleagues, I'm going to hand over to Zamile Ngubo. Zamile will take us through how do we plan out our activities. He will start projecting his screen shortly. He will take us through completing the first part of the ABC PIMP, which is your activities. Remember earlier on, Catherine took us through an overview of the ABC PIMP, what the book looks like, what are the different sections. So now we are zooming in. Where do you start and how do you start? Kindly focus on your unique requirements, colleagues, and do send us questions in the chat, and we will continue to respond and highlight any additional ones. Zamile, over to you. Zamile, your screen was showing for a while. I think it went blank. Some colleagues have raised questions that are being followed up individually. So the team will be liaising with you directly to follow up on your unique set of questions. Later on, our colleague Wisani Valoi will tell us what kind of support we will be able to offer you as you are busy with the application process. So we will respond to those questions, colleagues, and we will give you a better sense of how can we support you as you complete the ABC PIMP.
Mo? I think somebody must just step in for Zameli, please. I think he might have been subject to load shedding.
Connectivity issues. Okay. Colleagues, can you project for me the ABC PIMP? Thank you very much. Colleagues, as we mentioned earlier on, and Nazim tried to outline to us the case study that we are doing today, and he outlined for us the requirements in terms of the example that we are using today. As I mentioned earlier on, it is very important when you begin mapping out your project to work together as a team. Let all your team come together, brainstorm what your project is, get your partners involved as well, so that you have everyone in the room and you have a better sense of how the project is going to work. And then the ABC PIMP allows you to break it down in little pieces. So it's one big pie, and then you cut it into smaller pieces to better understand the requirements for each segment. And the reason that we are doing this, my colleague later on will speak about the costing side of it, is so that every side or every activity or sub-activity has to be costed. So the uniqueness of how the drawdowns, I saw an example of the drawdowns, will be answered later on. Will be explained later on, is that it is quite important that your drawdowns are aligned to your activities. So there has to be a link between what you are asking for, what you are going to do, and when you're going to actually achieve it. So the first part, colleagues, of the ABC PIMP, there are about 6 activity categories. So Kath, can you go through me the on the left-hand side on the number? So sorry, the description of the main activities. Yes, those ones. So you have an opportunity, colleagues, there to describe for us what activities you have in the project. So for instance, if your project focuses on, in this instance, it has the first main activity will be recruiting young people, then the training of young people, then putting them in different work opportunities. It is important as well, as you are thinking around this, to also begin to, how do you then, what key activities must start? So let's look at this example that we have now. So I'm trying to open it on my side for easy reference. In this instance, our first activity would be recruitment of young people for the program. So that is the description of the activity. But you then break it down further. If your main activity is recruiting young people, you begin to think about what is the first activity that you need to do. For instance, sub-activity 1.1 talks about advertising of youth support initiatives in relevant community newspapers, registration of candidates, shortlisting of candidates, and basic training of candidates when they start the program. Colleagues, it's important that you describe these activities for us. You will see later on when we are doing the costing, the importance of explaining a sub-activity. For instance, you cannot speak about training or recruiting young people, but you have not mentioned any advertising or any reach out or marketing material. So that means there will be a line item linked to this that is about designing a marketing or outreach brochures. For each and every sub-activity, you must indicate the output for that activity. So in this instance, it's the number of adverts posted, the number of candidates that are registered on the database, the number of candidates that are to be shortlisted, and the number of candidates that will be trained. And kindly ensure that the outputs are in numerical value, easy for tracking, easy to make sure that we are counting the same thing. For instance, if you're saying you are training or you have 10 adverts that you are going to be posting, that means there will be a direct link to the posting of adverts and the costing for those adverts. And for each and every sub-activity, there must be assumptions that you build around that. If there's going to be adverts training, the assumptions for that will be the adverts in this instance are placed once a week in the community newspaper, and then you can describe which newspapers those are. And in terms of the registration of candidates, you may speak about the fact that they need to apply on a portal. The portal must be designed, it must be ready. You may speak about when they've just finished registering, who's going to select them? Who's going to select them? Who's going to check them? You may talk about the assumptions there is that you're going to need 5 checkers, or you're going to need 5 verifiers, or you're going to need 5 initial assessors. So all of these are building into the assumptions of delivery of your initiative. And it is important from there for us to be able to better understand when will that activity happen. So in this instance, the number of adverts that will be posted will happen in period 1 all the way up until period 3. And the reason that is emphasized as well, colleagues, is that already when the initiative begins, when we have read your project logic and your project scope and your application, and you say to us, Mokete, in this initiative, I want to train young people. The first thing we would ask is that, look, if you're training young people, that means you must, by period 1, you must have the right facilities, you must have the right scope and setup for those young people to be able to take up work, or for those young people to be able to begin getting into the program. So maybe for some programs, colleagues, even before this initial onboarding of young people, you may have a first category activity that speaks about setting up. That is an important activity as well, because you may need, for example, to set up additional office spaces, set up and program laptops. You may need to train your initial coordinators and administrators. So this may happen one period before the project actually begins. So each project is unique, and how you describe the activities are linked to how you are going to budget. So if it's important for your project to say, in period 1, the first thing I need to do, I need to set up. So I need to go look for office space, or you probably have now quotes of ideal office spaces that you want to look at. So the first thing would then be, by the first period or the second period, we need to go confirm office leasing. We need to go set up the office spaces accordingly, make sure that they're functional, that everything is operating, the Wi-Fi is okay, backup generators are okay, so that the moment the young people begin to register on the system, there are people in the background behind the scenes that are checking all the data, that are verifying them, that are accepting them and assessing them as well. And this is why I mentioned earlier on the importance of having all your people available as you are planning the activities. Colleagues, it's very important. You will hear my colleague later on will speak about, if you have an existing finance model, you can plug it in here, you can make it work. But my colleague will also emphasize that it's very important that you begin with the activities, because it's the activities that are going to link with what exactly are you going to budget for, when are you going to do it, and how are you going to do it. Let's take the example of the second. So before I move on, so for every main activity, there has to be an overall activity attached to it. And looking at this one, you have the overall milestone being the number of candidates enrolled. So it means then when we are tracking, overall, we are tracking how many candidates have been enrolled. And that becomes the total of what you would have put in terms of the work that you would have done from registration to initial selection and shortlisting, and the candidates that actually got into the program. So it's very important now to think it like this. There's one big activity that has to happen. You break that activity in little parts. So in this instance is recruitment. Break down recruitment for us. You start by posting, they register, you shortlist them, you interview them, then they enroll. And it's important that you describe it in this way for us. If in this instance you had maybe roadshows, for example, if you have to go out there and look out for young people and do outreach, so the cost activity attached to that, which you necessarily won't see on the activity side will be transport, will be issues like accommodation, will be meals for the team that actually goes and does the outreaches. So this is why it's important, as you're thinking about the logic of your program, you really have an overview at a very high level of how it's gonna work, but now you zoom in into the ABC PIMP to say, this is what I need to do in the first month. So as you're planning with your team, these are some of the conversations, colleagues, that should be at the back of your mind. Should you be approved for funding? What are the initial activities that are important to kickstart the project? So what needs to be done by period 1? And you break it down for us. Let's take the second example. Kath, may we move on to the second one, where we are talking about demand activation. And the example that we used here, you are engaging with opportunity holders. You are now placing young people. The importance, colleagues, of as you are planning, for example, the difference between candidates that register and the candidates that get trained and the candidates that actually get placed is the issue of dropout or attrition. So as you're planning this, think behind the scenes. For example, if you're targeting, just for example's sake, for 3,000 young people, that means when you register, your registration must be able to allow more young people to apply. And the reason you are doing that is that you're factoring in that there will be some movement. There will be the young people that feel that, I don't think I want to do the program anymore. Or there'll be those that they leave for other opportunities. Or there'll be those that do not meet your initial requirements. Please bear in mind as well, during your application process, you will outline for us what are your parameters of selecting candidates. So you will have different requirements. You may have age, you may have location, you may have experience, you may have previous training, they must be computer literate, whatnot. So you may put various requirements which we will scrutinize during application, and we will engage you on it. Remember, this is you are the experts in this intervention, and we rely on your understanding in terms of, okay, this is how we select, but we have to make sure that it fits in what you have proposed as an initiative. So think broadly around the kind of selection criteria that you're going to set, and the kind of numbers that you need to have in the program in order to allow for attrition, in order to allow for dropouts. What does that look like at the end of the day? And bearing in mind, colleagues, earlier on there was a question around the different drawdowns. Each and every activity or each and every period is aligned to the money or the funding that you're gonna require. For instance, if you in period 1, you need to register, so your main activity will be the registration of young people. Did you budget for that? Is there enough funding for that? So my colleague later on will speak about various funding allocations and how that is going to work, bearing in mind that whatever you fail then to achieve in your first period falls onto the second period, and there's a ripple effect. So as you are targeting, it is also good to be ambitious, but it's also good to be realistic. What is realistically possible when a project starts? Can you really register 2,000 young people in your first month? Is it really realistic to peg your organization's performance on that number? Or you start gradually to say, actually, by the first period, I think we'll manage to register 500 because we'll be starting, there'll be early jitters, testing the system. So we could probably manage 500, and we'll see that peaking by period 2 to 900, period 3. By period 3, we should be at around 1.5 or so. So have a realistic targeting approach that you and your team can be able to work on. Colleagues, continue to ask questions, and Kath, you may stop me, or any other colleague. I'm not able to see the chat box. You may be able to stop me if there are any questions related to the output descriptions. Moving on, colleagues, then, so I've described how you then define your main activity, how you break it down, how you give us assumptions. It's important to build assumptions for the achievement of your activities. If those assumptions do not hold, for instance, if you need to train for young people to register on your platform, the assumption that you should be making there is that by period 1, you would have approved, or by period 1, by the time you actually get the project starting, you would have been approved, or you would have had an approved system that young people can register on. It would have been tested. It would have been updated if there are crawlies, and you are happy with it working. So if the assumption does not hold, it's an indication that you will have a challenge meeting that specific activity. So for every activity, build assumptions around it. For every output, build assumptions. What conditions are required for that activity to actually take place? I think for earlier, I mentioned around, for example, when you are selecting, you may say, in order to shortlist, I will need to hire 5 additional administrators, or 5 additional checkers, or something like that of the sort. So that is the assumption, in order for you to be able to deal with the volume of work that is going to come when you start registering young people on your system. So think about the different scenarios that are necessary to allow you to achieve your objectives, and build those into the model as you go. So that way, if, for example, you come by period 2 and we say, but why didn't you achieve 1, 2, 3? And then you are able to say, wait a minute, guys, my assumptions were that 1, 2, 3 would have happened, and those conditions failed to happen because they were beyond me and I could not control them. And this is why there is low performance for these specific periods. So assumptions are very, very important, colleagues. Now I'm going to move on to the section that is category activity 6 and category activity 7. Tebogo, we are not taking live questions, colleagues. Just as you enter the meeting room, please note that you can post your chats, and we will be responding to them. The colleagues will highlight to them as I'm going through the session. All unanswered questions will be in the frequently asked question document, which will be posted online. Lerato will continue to send the link for that, and they will make this recording available as well for the benefit of colleagues that could not be present. Colleagues, now category activity 6 and 7 are very compulsory. In order for us to understand what is happening in your program, in order for us to understand how young people are being given a gainful experience, we need to do regular tracking and reporting. So it's not enough to just manage the project in terms of training, placing, and engaging with various partners. You need to put in place a system that allows you to track the movement and engagement of young people. We speak about the purpose of the Innovation Fund is really addressing barriers in the market for youth employability. So we need to see that the barriers that you have unlocked, are they really working? And this also it's a good opportunity to be able to make sure that you follow up with your partners on the ground, you follow up with the young people that are placed in job opportunities, to give us a better sense and give you a better sense that the intention of the objectives of the project are being met. So under 6.1, you will see that the project team is involved in regular and ongoing monitoring and reporting. Monitoring and reporting, colleagues, we will differentiate later when we speak about evaluation, is part of project management. You need to be tracking what is happening. So in your proposal, you would be able to propose to us, how are you going to track young people in your project? Are you going to do it manually? Are you going to do sporadic visits regularly? What tracking system are you going to put in place to be able to report to the fund manager on a regular basis that young people are gainfully employed and the project is doing what it needs to be doing? So on a monthly basis, there'll be required reports. We've already pre-populated some of these areas for you, where we've stated when the reports will be needed, when the quarterly and monthly reporting will be needed. Bear in mind, colleagues, that this is linked to your drawdowns, and this is linked as well to the performance of your targets. If we have promised that by a particular period, there are X number of young people that you are going to train, or X number of people that you're going to place in jobs, this is what we want to see. Are you sufficiently tracking them? Category activity 7 looks at the audit and evaluation function. I want to highlight the importance of this section. As I mentioned earlier on, monitoring is part of your project management. You are tracking what is happening in your program, and you are regularly updating and reporting for it. It also gives you early warning system to be able to course correct. Maybe you're realizing actually young people are registering slowly on the portal. It's actually better to go to the school and identify them and offer them practical registration. So you should be able, this is an innovation round. So you should be able to think outside the box. You should be able to be flexible, to be agile in terms of how do you identify young people. I think if there's anything, colleagues, we've learned about COVID-19 is that old ways of doing things do not work. So we need to be able to be creative in how we target for young people, how we work with them, how we work with partners. This has to be reflected as well in your programming, in your targeting. So the purpose then of the audit, of the evaluation and audit function is that now that all of these things have happened, do they make sense? We have provided for those that will be contracted and will be going to the next stage, there will be a self-evaluation reporting template. Colleagues, we advise that at the beginning of your program, at the beginning as you're brainstorming with your team and thinking around how to set up your intervention, do consult evaluation experts, do consult M&E consultant who work in the field of program monitoring in development interventions, to be able to help you understand what evaluation criteria and frameworks you need to set. The reason this is important is that it allows you at the very early stage to set up appropriate structures to gather the data that is necessary for you to evidence your performance. I'll repeat that, colleagues. It's very, very important that early on engage an M&E expert, a consultant, and an organization that will able at the onset help you set about an M&E framework, help you to set about the kind of data that are you going to need in this intervention. And then they're able to say to you, if you need this kind of data, you need then to set up the program like this. If you need this kind of data, this is where you need to set up the program, so that when reporting time comes, there's enough information. When reporting time comes, you have all that information available. You do not wait up until the end to say, oops, I don't have this information. A regular occurrence that we have is that partners will tell us that beneficiaries on the ground are not willing to share information because of POPI, or they're telling us about their partners are not willing to share information about POPI. My colleague later on in the legal section will speak about that. But we rely on you, colleagues, that as you are working on your program, you are engaging those partners in your MOU and your agreements with them. You flesh out the requirements of sharing information. What information will be necessary? What information will be shared with the fund manager, and so forth. It is important that we work together in partnership, so that we don't wait up until the end and then you realize that your partners are not willing to give you information, which then means you cannot evidence your performance. So very early on, have an expert who understands the nitty-gritties of setting up a program of the size, of the scale, and can easily advise you how to prepare yourself. There is an available self-evaluation report template that will be available, and we will be able to take your organization and your staff members as well as your teams through it after contracting. So already you can see from the self-evaluation report what information will be required when the project comes to an end. And then already you begin to position or augment the initiative such that that information is available regularly as you are implementing. At the end of the project also, colleagues, you will be required to appoint an independent auditor to check your books, to confirm that the monies that flowed into the program were used for the intended purpose. We spoke earlier on about we are doing things differently, we are being transparent, we're being accountable. So it is important that earlier on as well, you also budget and plan for an independent audit. This will be very important. We will be asking each other those questions. How have you spent the funds? Where have you spent the fund? The DDG mentioned earlier on that what we're looking at is, one, have you addressed barriers? But number two, what is the benefit flow to beneficiaries? What change have you made to the lives of young people? So this is not about empowering organizations, but we are looking at what change have you really brought to the lives of young people. And as we're doing things like audit and self-evaluations, we are going back to review the intervention logic. Did you do what you said you were going to do? Have you achieved according to the grant agreement? So these conversations, colleagues, will be regular. Every time you report, we will be asking you regularly, are you implementing the project as approved? Are you spending the funds as approved? And each and every time you'll be required to show a proof. This allows us to not wait up until the end of the program to realize, oopsie, there was a problem. We begin now so that we self-correct. If there are any misunderstandings, we correct them as we are going. We do not wait up until the end, but as we are going, we are being agile, as I mentioned earlier on, and we're being flexible. So category 7 is very important. I'm going to take a pause and breathe. That has been a mouthful. And then we're going to go into anticipated outcomes that you're going to be contracted for. Colleagues, I'm going to pause there and take questions around the planning of the outcomes and outputs and activities before we look at the program indicators. Are there any specific questions? So your colleague, I'm going through the chats. Colleagues, you'll alert me if I'm missing anything. I went all the way up. I do not see anything related to the activities and outputs.
You're correct, Mo. There was nothing related to the issues that you were addressing now in your presentation. You may
awesome. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I will take that. It means I'm an excellent communicator and I'm not talking to myself. If there are no questions, it means we are all on the same page. Colleagues, you will see the importance of the activities when we get to the finance side. As I mentioned earlier on, getting an M&E person, getting all your project team together, getting everyone that's on the ground in the middle, it's very important to help you map out your activities, because for every activity and output, there's funding that is packed to it. So it's better to make sure that all of those are fleshed out earlier on. It may be tedious at first, but as soon as you set out your activities appropriately, your project is good to go. Thank you, Kath. Colleagues, these are the 6 program indicators for which you will be contracted to. And they speak specifically to this innovative funding window. I'm going to speak overall to the indicators: the number of registered unemployed young people, the number of individual young people supported, And it's important to also make the distinction. The first one, it's about registration. The second one is one that are now being supported. The number of services that they've secured. We also understand that the uniqueness of the labor market is that young people may participate in various programs at the same time, or they may move from one program to another. We want to be able to capture that. How many services have they been able to secure? Did they take one service, 2, 3, or 4, or even more? Of course, depending on the length of the service. Number of individual people who have secured earning opportunities. So they secure a service, and now they get into what we call opportunity holders. We want to understand, now that they're in the system, where are they placed, and how many earning opportunities have they qualified for? The fifth one, the number of earning opportunities secured by young people from opportunity holders. Similar to the fifth one, here we want to see how many earning opportunities have they secured. So it's the number of young people, remember number 4, the number of young people that secure the opportunities, earning opportunities. The fifth one is how many of those earning opportunities have they secured. And the sixth one is the number of organizations you have partnered with. We kept on mentioning throughout the presentation, and the colleagues have responded in the chat, the importance of partnering. And the purpose of this window also, we want to know, who have you partnered with? How many organizations are you partnering with to allow you to be able to deliver your innovative program? So it's important to also track that regularly, to also show that how you are part of a wider ecosystem of support. So you're not just working alone, but you're working with other partners in the field. You are part of the bigger picture. So you want to be able to track that, to say that in month 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, these are the organizations that I will be working with. Colleagues, it's important to understand the required means of verification. And as I mentioned earlier on, as you are designing your intervention, really think about what capacity do you have that will be able to allow you to fulfill that target. These 6 indicators, they do not change, colleagues. They do not change. You may qualify for, or some of them may not be applicable to you, but these ones do not change. We want to see a body of evidence that supports the achievements of the prescribed indicator. In the first instance, the means of verification relates to a manual registration or electronic registration database that would make available. But we also want to see ID copies, source of ID copies, and attestations from the intermediary. And what we mean by that is that you send to us proof of the registrations tick. You also say either it's electronic or it's manual, that these are the young people Mukiti that registered in period 1. These are their ID copies. And then there's an what we call an attestation or an affidavit. And with that, it means whoever is duly authorized in your organization to sign official documents will then say, Mugidi, my organization has placed 150 or has registered 150 people, young people from the period of this and this and that. And here are their names and here are their ID numbers. We have provided evidence for these, and I can confirm this information is correct. And the CEO or the MD, the CFO, head of training, head of whatnot, they sign through to prove that that information is accurate. Colleague, it's important to do an attestation, because when we are doing our audit trails and we are trying to confirm that, wait a minute, on the system you provided us, let's say it's period 1, you said you registered 150, but the evidence we got said 100. But the CEO or whoever signed the attestation gave us a different number. So you want the different sources of evidence to speak to each other, but also what this shows us is that you have a system that also speaks to each other. Your department or your unit that deals with registering gives you information. The department that deals with checking it gives it to whoever has overview of it and gets to make sure that it's analyzed properly. And there's a trickle down of or information loop within your organization in terms of what is happening and how it is happening. And it is also, once again, important to build assumptions around the achievement of this indicator. The second one also we speak about in an electronic system. We speak, or either a manual or an electronic system. Colleagues, you have an opportunity in your appraisal, in your application, to motivate or to propose what system will be suitable for you. How long will it take for you to have that system working or tested? Or maybe you already have the system and you've been using it for a while. How long will it take for you to actually make use of the system? Can it consolidate data and share it with the fund? So each and every means of verification you will be contracted for in your grant agreement. The means of verification, colleagues, do not change. This is what you say to us. You are saying, every time I achieve this indicator, this is how I will prove it has happened. And that is a tick. So it is important that we are not just doing this for the sake of compliance, but we are also keeping each other accountable. You said you will register young people. You said you will have an electronic registration database that you will share with us quarterly. So there shouldn't be other periods where the registration system was down, but you did have young people, but the young people were manual, but you forgot to update it, and then it was not there. So all of those should be built in your assumptions. What do you do in a case where the system is glitches and you are not able to meet your targets? So think about all the various conditions and the scenarios that may happen in your program that can come in the way of you being able to deliver. And can you sufficiently bounce back and give us enough information to confirm that a target has been met? Are there any questions, colleagues, there on the program indicators and the means of verification? Before we move on to the project-specific indicators. I'm just perusing through, colleagues, me trying to read the comments. Okay, colleagues, I'm not seeing anything related to the mapping up or understanding of the means of verification. Once again, this information is available in the term sheet. It breaks it down for you, so you do have an opportunity to understand it. And later on, my colleague Wisani will speak about exactly how you access the kind of support that will be available to you at the end as you're busy with your application. We will not be able to help you complete the ABC PIMP, colleagues, but we will be there to help you. When you are not sure where to put a certain target or how to plan for it, we are an email away and a telephone call away, which will be shared throughout the chats and also at the end of the presentation, so that you are not alone in completing this. You know that we are here to support you understand the requirements. Also a reminder, colleagues, this is a competition. We request you to put your best foot forward. We are competing for limited funds to implement the most innovative program. This has to be reflected in your planning. This has to be reflected in how you map out your activities, how you're going to achieve them. So as you're thinking through about your intervention, think also about what makes you stand out in your application, in how you're going to manage the program, and how you're going to achieve the various targets as well. So colleagues, in the absence of any project-specific questions, I'm going to move on to this project-specific indicators. So the first part of indicator 1 to 6, they spoke about the projects that, the indicators that, that you would be contracted for. which are mandatory. Now below, you are looking at the indicators that we are asking you to propose. Remember what I said earlier on. Please do work with someone who is an expert in program design, someone who's an M&E person, someone who can give you insight. Contract that person at the beginning of your intervention to help you understand what needs to be done to map out the project-specific milestone for your interventions. Remember, the ones we put above, those will apply across all the interventions in this funding window. But the ones that we are putting, that you are to propose for us, and I think you're about 11 blocks. It does not mean, colleagues, you have to have all 11. You may have 3 program level project level indicators, or 4 or 2. But we will always ask you, is this enough to give you a sense of what is happening in your project? The thing about indicators is that they signal what is happening in your project. So think about it that way. What signals do you need to understand that your project is working? What signals do you need to help you better understand that you are achieving your intended objectives? For this example, the first signal that one needs to understand that the project is on track is the number of candidates enrolled. Before we talk about anything else, it is important to understand, wait a minute, are we enrolling the right number of young people? Because if we are not enrolling the right number of young people, we will find it very difficult then to achieve all those 6 program level indicators. The second one is the number of commitments from opportunity holders to offer young people earning opportunities. It is important to also track that. And what you are tracking here is young people get placed with an opportunity holder. However, you're also tracking how many commitment letters are the young people receiving. It is one thing to say 10 young people have been placed with X number of organizations, but are you tracking, are they actually receiving commitment letters? So think about it that this allows you an opportunity to put in place the kind of signals or indicators to help you understand, is your intervention working? And you have an opportunity here to propose your own means of verification. And the means of verification allow us to see that, has this activity taken place? How do we know that it has taken place? When you have a full list of candidates, or when you have available commitment letters. So it is important, colleagues, to have those available in your organization as well as you are thinking around what is important to track in the project. Just one more thing, colleagues, and I'm done with my activity section. It is important when you are thinking about the ABC PIMP, there is a logical and sequential flow of activities from one end to another. So from initial registration all the way to project close out and audit. So you need to then have that overall view of this is the back-to-back and of the project when it starts all the way up until it ends. And then you then zoom into the different parts. For teams that are quite bigger, you may have the advantage then to have a specific team deal with training and recruitment, a specific team that deals with demand activation, a specific team that deals linkages. And that's when we're talking about looking for new partnerships and whatnot. And then you have another team that focuses on tracking. And then you ask all these different teams to say, okay, you team 1, team 3, team 4, team 5, brainstorm around how are we going to form partnerships? How are we going to track? How are we going to report? How are we going to set up the right frameworks? And you then bring it all together in the ABC PIMP in a consolidated view. You then helps you to better understand what are your indicators? What exactly are you measuring? And what are the means of verification that you and your partners, even within your organizations, can honestly be able to process? Colleagues, it's important to emphasize that we understand that You are not researchers, and these are not research programs. You are implementers, and you're on the ground and you're working hard with young people. So you need to be reasonable as well in terms of the volume of information that the organization can carry and how you can process that. You need to be reasonable as well about how complex or how simple that kind of information should be. At the back of your mind, as you are setting up the ABC PIMP and the means of verification, the question that you should be asking is, what information will I need to prove to the fund manager that I've undertaken this activity? And then you begin then working around the activity based on that. What information will you need to prove that you have formed new linkages? What information are you going to need to show that you've placed young people in employment opportunities or in sustainable opportunity holders? So think about it like that, to say, team, what do we need to prove that these activities have actually taken place? And when we receive that information, in what format can we receive that information? How can we store the information? How long can we store that information? So we are looking to you, colleagues, as you are working through your ABC PIMP and your activities and outlining them, to really propose to us what is feasible. When we do our assessments, as I think Nazim mentioned earlier on, we will be giving you a call throughout the December period to clarify some of the things. So you may have put something that maybe you're not sure about and whatnot. Do not worry also about that. We will be getting back to you when you are at that stage, and we will be confirming all the various information that you have put in place. Yes, the ABC PIMP is part of your application. Remember, in the narrative, in the GMS, you are telling the story of the project. The ABC PIMP allows you to take all that story and put it in a plan. To say, Mukete, I've described the story of what I want to do and how the project logic is going to work and who I want to work with. Now, this is how I want to plan it out. This is how I want to implement it. So think about it that way. It's an implementation tool. It's not an application tool, it's an implementing tool. It allows you to better implement and track your program. Colleagues, I'm gonna take a pause and stop there. I've provided a mouthful on the sequencing of activities, setting up your project in order to link it with finance. When we do go after lunch to the next section on finance, I think we will better appreciate the importance of setting out activities, because once that is done, you will see how it will be easy for my finance colleague to link the activities to the costing, how it will be easy to link the activities to the budgeting, because suddenly it will be like a light bulb. There's the transport and accommodation cost I was talking about, and the meals for the trainers that will be on the field. There is a link between the two. So I'm going to pause there, colleagues, and see if are there any questions related to the discussion that we've just had on the ABC PIMP. Once again, there will be an opportunity to give support in terms of clarifying which sections, how to respond to them, what needs to be completed, and Wisani will explain that at the end of today's session. Any questions, colleagues? Apologies if I'm trying to open multiple screens, so I'm going to ask my colleagues to help me here as well. Okay, Romeo, that one I'll hand over to my colleagues. That's related overall to the impact of COVID-19 on implementation. Colleagues, please note that one. Once again, colleagues, we do encourage partnerships. That is the purpose of the window, so that we bring together partners to work together innovatively and strategically also to implement, to address barriers that we have identified in the market. I am going to assume, colleagues, that there are no specific programs that are related to the activity section. I do note that, Nazim, there is that section on eligibility that I see. I remember you and Sfiso had spoken about it earlier on. May I ask that we return to it, Sfiso, in terms of the eligibility criteria at the beginning of the registration process and the requirements? What are those yes and no questions, and what does it mean? Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Mokete. So the eligibility questions, of which there are 11, actually 10. The one is simply a confirmation of the fact that you've completed the eligibility criteria correctly. If I can go through it, if you don't mind, I'll go through it one by one. Non-profit organizations are required to be registered with the Department of Social Development. I think that's pretty clear. Non-for-profit entities, in terms of the Employment Services Act, are required to be registered with the Department of Employment and Labor if you are providing employment services as defined by the Act. And those employment services would include advising a young person on career opportunities, assessing them for those opportunities, providing advice to employers in terms of employing young persons or people, unemployed people in general. So those are the prescripts of the Act, and for-profit entities are required to be registered. We require 3 years of financial statements for that organization or the lead applicant. We require evidence or demonstration of technical experience within the area of interest. That's not, I'm talking about eligibility criteria number 4, apologies. The track record or technical experience of the applicant for a 3-year period within the area of interest. Okay, I think that's pretty clear as well. Is your organization willing to participate in the National Pathway Management Network? That is fundamental to the National Pathway Management Network, to have all of these networks within a network of networks to enable the young person to access those opportunities across the network. So it is a fundamental element of that National Pathway Management Network. Has your organization previously received funding for the proposed initiative? Now, this was a question that was posed in the chat earlier as well. If you are proposing an initiative that you are currently implementing and have already been funded from wherever, then there is no additionality in the innovation fund funding that work again. However, if you are proposing an initiative that is either scaling or different, that is clearly differentiated from that particular program that I mentioned, then you are able to access funding for those individual initiatives. Does your organization has the ability to secure match funding and minimum cash match funding level? I think that's also self-explanatory. And here we've had a lot of comments about the ability to raise that match funding. And I will briefly go through what constitutes match funding. Firstly, to meet the minimum requirements, match funding has to be contributed in cash. That match funding can be made up of an own contribution from the applicant, it can be made up of contributions from other sources, i.e. your funding partners, etc., or loan financing. Now, again, we've had many queries about organizations saying they're not able to fund that, and that is why we are requesting collaboration between various parties so that these various elements can be met. Some organizations may have technical skills to implement, but they may not have funding. Others may have funding available, but not necessarily the technical skill. So that level of collaboration ensures that the various prescripts are met. 1.8 refers to administrative issues. We require a valid tax clearance certificate, for argument's sake. That is a requirement, even if we then approve you after the fact. If we don't have that, we actually cannot disburse to that contracted party. Do you agree that while intellectual property will reside with you, if the application, you will be permitted the jobs fund to use the concept for learning? So let me say that intellectual property will always belong to the applicant or the party that is part of a particular application. Given the learning agenda, which is crucial to the innovation fund, we are requesting that we use that intellectual property and the elements of and the outcomes of a particular initiative to inform future interventions or operations of the National Pathway Management Network, to contribute to the ultimate aim, which is improve the success rate of our young person in accessing various opportunities. But the intellectual property will always be the domain of the applicant or party involved. Now, confirm that you will open a new dedicated bank account. That again is a governance issue. If money is provided to any successful applicant, because we are disbursing public funds, we are required to track all funding that is provided to that particular applicant, track whether that funding was utilized as it has been agreed upon previously. We do that via a project bank account, or money flows or funding flows through that account, and all expenditure is funded from that account to enable us to track those expenditures properly. So Moketi, those are the 10. The final one is a confirmation that the answers are correct and true. Have I satisfied what you in your mind, or is there something I left out that I need to go over again?
Thank you, Nazim. I think what I will wait is I will see the comments that come in from colleagues, but particularly on that question. Nazim, I have a question, but before I get back to you, I would like Najwa to speak to a specific issue. Najwa, how do we factor in COVID-19 and this particular innovation fund? I know you have addressed it, but can you highlight it for the benefit of the ones that are not reading the comments? The question that's coming around, should we be in another lockdown? How do we factor in COVID-19 and the uniqueness of this window?
Thanks, Mo. So yes, that does present a challenge. And as there was a comment in the chat, is that we really cannot afford to stop our interventions and the rollout of this program just because we are finding ourselves within a COVID context. So what we are doing in the applications, there are specific questions in those application forms that actually talk to how are people going to implement their program within the context of COVID. Because it is important that we don't, make funding available to organizations who have a business model that actually cannot continue if we're working in a COVID situation. So the best that we can do is to make sure that when we assess and appraise the applications, that the applicants are very clear and have a plausible plan to work within a COVID context. Thanks, Mo.
Awesome. Thank you, Najwa. Nazim, but I want to give this the second last question to Fidelis to emphasize for us the NYS and the Innovation Fund. There seems to be a confusion, colleagues, especially for some of the colleagues that probably have the 2 term sheets with them, that they're looking at the NYS and they're looking at the Innovation Fund. Fidelis, I know you've mentioned, you've typed it out in a response in the comments. Can you kindly highlight it again at a high level? What are we looking at, and what are the difference between the NYS and the Innovation Fund that we are specifically speaking to today?
Thanks, Mo. But I think that the challenge that I'm seeing is one where when people go on the website, they pick documents from the one initiative, yet they actually want to pick documents for the other. So I think what might be useful is for us to show this page where this information is available, and then scroll down and show that there's a section for so if you scroll down slowly, the web page that we've been showing you starts off with, go to the top, please. So we take it from the top slowly and go to the bottom and show the different segments. So go to the top, please. The web page starts with a description of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. So both calls for proposals that we are presenting to you are part of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. I think the DDG spoke to this earlier, as well as my other colleagues. On the website, you have that introduction and context, and then if you slowly scroll down, you then get to a part where the National Youth Service Program is described. Now, the training session for this was already hosted yesterday. And today, we are not focusing on the National Youth Service Program. So if you scroll down, you will see that for the National Youth Service Program, eligibility criteria explained, and then the term sheet that we've been talking about is also available there. But for today, you are not looking for the National Youth Service Program term sheet, and you're not looking at the eligibility criteria for the National Youth Service Program. You need to keep scrolling down, and then you get to the National Pathway Management Network Innovation Fund. That's the program we're discussing today. And so the eligibility criteria there is what's outlined below. So you can see, to answer the question directly on whether private companies and public entities can apply, the summary there shows you that it's for non-profit, but it's also for private companies and for the public sector as well. And there are different criteria outlined there. If you scroll slowly again down, you will see now where you can download the detailed criteria. That's the term sheet you want to use for this session, not the one for National Youth Service. So I think more it was a case of the website having quite a lot of information there, and participants requiring guidance in terms of which documents to refer to as it relates to today's discussion. Thanks, Mo.